In this episode, we will learn about our innate capabilities to handle complexity and why those capabilities leave the room when we most need them.
And instead, how can we make complexity our friend? Welcome to episode 32 of the Leading Complexity podcast. This is where we explore the art of leading organization in today's complex, hyper-competitive landscape. We do this together with some of the world's foremost thinkers within leadership. My name is Tomas Björkholm, and with me I have Göthe.
In this episode, we will discuss the complexity genius and listen to an interview with Jennifer Garvey Berger.
Jennifer is the author of multiple books on leadership and complexity. She is the founder of Coaching's Rising. We had the privilege to talk to Jennifer about her latest book, Unleash Your Complexity Genius, or the undertitle, Growing Your Inner Capacity to Lead.
How would you describe complexity?
Complexity, I think, is when there are so many interwoven, interdependent features that you both can't tell what's going to happen next, and you also can't get a purchase on how to control the thing that's emerging. It's kind of bigger than the sum of its parts, and it has this interdependent, nonlinear feature that means that a small action from a small player might have a huge effect, or it might not have a huge effect, and you just don't know. And that's what makes it so exciting and so creative, and also so overwhelming and stressful for most people.
Great. So what is your key message to leaders kind of navigating in this complexity?
Well, I think the first message I want to offer is, actually, we can be great at this. And when we are great at this, complexity is not like a cruel force that we have to find ourselves toiling against. It's actually one of the great energetic moves of the world. And I think the people who will be able to navigate this next moment in our human history well are those who don't fight against complexity, but actually can understand the patterns and the approaches that make complexity a friend in terms of innovation, creativity, and nonlinear greatness, as opposed to an enemy, which I think a lot of people naturally think about complexity as an enemy.
Complexity genius. Briefly, how did you come up with that, and what's it about?
So my dear friend Carolyn Coughlin and I have been thinking for years together about this question about what does complexity do to the body. Actually, we've gotten really interested. In my book before this, I did a lot of research into these kind of traps leaders fall into, and I found that all of them had this kind of body component. We are, in some ways, our nervous system is working in this complex world without our noticing it very much. And so Complexity Genius was our investigation into what is it that we are naturally gifted at. It's our natural birthright. It's inside us that makes complexity not necessarily effortless, but kind of a wonderful force for us to be inside. And then we discovered over the course of our research this kind of clear paradox that we have incredibly good resources for handling complexity until things get really complex. And then those resources, we become overwhelmed, and those resources kind of leave the room, and we do less helpful things. And so Carolyn and I have been working on this question of how do we amplify those natural resources so that when we're faced with complexity, we can rise to the occasion with grace and joy.
Jenny is so lovely. She has a really interesting definition of complexity that I think could be worth just mentioning once more. She's saying that it's kind of bigger than the sum of its parts, and it has an interdependent nonlinear feature that means a small action from a small player might have a huge effect, or it might not, and you just don't know. I really love that.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes complexity so interesting and exciting, and also, yeah, creative in one way. But it's also the same reason why it's often feeling overwhelmed or stressful for most people, that we just don't know the outcome. There is so many kind of interwoven connections and uncertainties. So yeah, in one way it creates all the opportunities and it's something exciting, but it's also, yeah, you can easily feel stress about it.
But why do you think it creates so many feelings?
We have, I think we want to be in control. We want to feel that we know what will happen, and that kind of creates the reaction to take control. And then when we cannot really feel that we are in control, we kind of get stressed about it, and often we then try to get more control, which kind of is counterproductive.
It can even almost make complexity worse. And but it's also showing. She's saying that it could create some positive feelings, like feeling of being exciting or creative, even. How do you interpret that part?
Yeah, I think she talks about that's an energetic move that moves the world, and yeah, I think the uncertainty is also something that we want to have. We get bored if everything is certain. We want to innovate, we want to create new things, new opportunities, and it would be very boring, I think, if everything was predictable, and we wouldn't have many opportunities even.
Yeah, I guess that's the reason why some people love horror movies, for instance, because you really don't know what is happening around the corner, or you have a guess which could be even worse than what is actually happening. Or why not go for a roller coaster? It's also this feeling that something is happening all the time. But I think when we talk about more in the corporate world, this also is creating the opportunity for new startups. Because if everything would just be the way it has been for the last 50 years, it's very hard to compete with the old, big, established companies, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's what disruption is about, that you are kind of doing something completely different, and that's exciting, I think, to come up with new, better ways of doing things.
We should not work against complexity, but instead she says that we should understand the patterns. What are the patterns we're talking about? And this makes very much sense, because we listened to Linda Rising just a couple of episodes ago, and she was also talking about patterns. Please remind us.
Yeah, I think humans are pattern recognition creatures. So we look for patterns, and when we recognize something, the similarities, we can kind of easily see those patterns.
Her latest book, as you mentioned, was called Complexity Genius. Do you know why she is using this name? Where this title comes from?
Yes, so she was researching leadership development, and then they realized that there were a lot of things that was patterns then for leaders that wasn't so helpful. So that got in the way of leading, but actually they realized that many of these things that got in the way, they could kind of resolve by connecting it to our human wisdom as humans. We have it in our bodies, so to say. We've been living in nature for forever. It's just the last couple of 100 years when we had the industrialization. So we know how to live in complex natures. It's innate to us. But we have to kind of remember and bring that out. And in stressful moments at work, we often get stressed and we lose those capabilities even more.
I think that's why when she's working with Carolyn Coughlin, I know that especially Carolyn is talking very much about that you have it in you. And if you just start listening to your own body, because it's pre-programmed to handle complexity, that could actually help you.
I think we are naturally gifted to handle complexity. For example, when we are feeling overwhelmed, if you take a deep breath, you get really centered, you start to relax. It's really difficult to be stressed at the same time as you're taking kind of slow, deep breath. And yeah, in the book, she talks about how taking these deep breaths kind of, for example, resets the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the ability to think creatively. So you will be able then to kind of slow down, see more opportunities, have more creative thinking and problem solving.
I think this is very much connected to what David Rock is talking about in his book, Your Brain at Work, where he's talking about the 3 different levels, like the whispering level, so to speak, is a creative level. And if you are the logic level, that is more talking, and the threatened level, where you have the stress, that is like screaming. So if you're threatened, you can't think logically, and if you have a logical problem in front of you, you can't be creative. So creativity comes when you are so less stressed, so far away from feeling threatened, that you just let your brain like just walk around in itself and coming up with different angles and ideas how to solve maybe a hard problem.
I'm thinking about taking this breath again, that I just learned to do that when I was playing sports. If in a stressful situation, try to relax, take some deep breath, and get recentered. And nowadays I use it when in coaching. I have it as a check-in exercise mostly, that taking kind of 3 breaths to kind of get centered, get into coaching mode, and get creative and focused. And it really works. I've tried it many times, and I often get the response that, oh, I don't have time for that. But what am I thinking afterwards? The other person feels kind of really centered, relaxed, and just what was needed.
So our advice just now to all the listeners: take 3 deep breaths.
Yes.
Okay, so I think she has also some advices in her book, more of them, and one of them are kind of touching what we're talking about right now, like regulate your state, and not becoming stressed, because if we get stressed, we will not be thinking logically, and afterward maybe we will not really recognize the result and not feel very good about our actions in the state when we are stressed. So try to stay calm, and then you'll be much more intelligent, kind of.
Yeah, so if you can be some self-composure, stand calm in the kind of midst of everything changing, and kind of relax into that, that's good advice.
Second is focus on now.
Yeah, so when I work with coaching, that is so common that people are either kind of too focused on the past, like, oh, it used to be much better, or things were different before, or they might be living in the future, when I retire, then I'm going to do this, or I'm going to start exercising later, or if only those people would do this, then I would do then I would be happy. But the reality is that you cannot really change the future unless you act in the now. So kind of letting go of how you think things should be, or how they were, and still you could have a clear direction or a goal, but then you need to kind of be here and now, focus on the present, what you actually can do about things.
I see the dilemma here, because if we just talk about being too much in the now, it's very easy to become reactive, and as a leader it's important to be proactive. So my take on this is to say, plan for the future, but be aware of the nows. And of course, if something is happening, we need to react on that. Let's continue. Building connections.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of research showing that if you have strong connections, friendships, and support, then you can manage uncertainty. And actually, I recently read that there was this discussion about preparing for uncertainties or crisis or war even, and people should kind of have household goods at home, etc. But that wasn't the key point according to this. It was more having a support network, having relationships was much, much more important than kind of having canned food or water or other things.
Humans are more or less very social people.
Yeah.
It's a good thing. Next thing is experiment playfully, and that we recognize this from Agile. We don't know the answer. We have to try things. So try, inspect, and adapt is very important in complexity. Moving on to shift emotions.
Yeah, so I mean, sometimes not taking yourself too seriously, just laugh about it, or kind of stepping out of your emotions and saying, "Oh, what is this really about?" And you are not your emotions, but they are good information. So, interesting. How do I feel? Why do I feel this now? And yeah, maybe something use some humor or laughter as well, kind of ease the situation.
Yeah, I heard if you have a problem you can't solve, jolt. Try something crazy and see if that will shake everything around. Next advice from the book is use your body, and we talked about that to have your body as a good sensor. But the last point, express love.
Yeah, so I think it relates back to the building connections and being kind, grateful, appreciating what you have, and deepening relationships. That also creates sense of belonging. And if you feel loved, then also, yeah, maybe trivial things that you cannot control is not that of importance always.
Beautiful. Let's wrap up for today.
Yes, we're curious about your reflections. Please share your comments and like the video and share it with your friends. And check out all the other episodes at leadingcomplexity.com/podcasts.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you.